What happens when free trade becomes less free? And get ready, because Donald Trump, who calls himself a tariff man, is coming back to the White House. And that means...
For Canada, we have to get our own playbook ready, which will include retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. If you like, Kentucky bourbon, my advice is stock up on it now, because the odds are that's going to be one of the things that gets hit with Canadian tariffs if we have to get into some kind of a trade war.
Former Deputy Prime Minister John Manley thinks our largest trading partner souring on trade is not great. And U.S. relations aren't his only worry. Hi, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. We make this, you make that, then we swap. Global trade has run on this thinking since the 80s. But now more countries, like the US, are becoming more protectionist. Coming up, we talk to John Manley about Canada's place in a new era of, I win, you lose. Also today, weather apps on our phones mean we don't even have to go outside to complain about the weather. And their forecasts are getting better all the time. So, who's paying for that? Up first, do you go to as many movies as you used to? Chances are the answer is no. And for the movie business, that's a worry. Patty Nolan loves going to the movies. When she was younger, before she had kids,
I would probably go at least once a week. If they were showing a bunch of movies that I liked, I would go, a couple times a week.
She did that for years. On Friday night, she'd go and see whatever was planned. Then, 2020, the pandemic, she got out of the habit.
We kind of got used to staying at home and, watching movies on our TV. And then when the theaters did reopen, it just seemed like a lot of effort to get to the movies. And I didn't necessarily like what was playing at the theaters. So I just wasn't really motivated to leave the house to go, see yet another action movie or a Marvel movie or something.
Then there's the prices. Movies aren't such a cheap night out anymore.
If it's just my husband and I, it's like $50 to go to a movie. So it needs to be really good to kind of draw us into a movie, because that's a lot of money, $50.
She still loves a good movie, but she doesn't go like she used to. Just like Patty, fewer people are going to the movies. Ticket sales, compared to 20 years ago, have fallen nearly in half. Now, if this were a movie trailer, this is where you'd hear, "In a world where Hollywood is at a crossroads, the future of movie theaters hangs in the balance. Will life for movie lovers ever be the same?" Okay, real life isn't that dramatic, but the industry is shrinking. Studios are releasing fewer movies. And 2024, the year of the flop, isn't helping. Did you see Argyle? No? You have a lot of company.
Come on, get happy.
The Joker and Mad Max sequels bombed. Francis Ford Coppola, Kevin Costner, The Rock, they all sank at the box office.
The kind of motto that the industry on the film side has taken is survive till 2025.
Brandon Katz is with Parrot Analytics. He's an analyst for the entertainment industry. He says Hollywood can explain away 2024. The writer's strike led to fewer big releases. And sometimes audiences just don't dig your movie. But Hollywood knows its problems go deeper than just one soft year at the box office.
Film studios, major film studios, are releasing less movies on average per year than they were in the past. It makes the average consumer feel like there's a real dulling down of the content offered and a real contraction of the industry. And the numbers more or less back that up.
In the 90s and 2000s, the big studios released more than 110 movies a year. Now, it's around 80. And fewer movies isn't the only reason ticket sales have fallen off a cliff. Like when streaming came along.
There was less of an incentive to travel out to theaters, to pay all that money, and to kind of see things in theaters as opposed to like, well, I can just wait until it arrives on TV in one of the many windows.
Streaming makes watching stuff from the couch more profitable than ever. Most of the big movie studios have been bought by even bigger corporations. Amazon owns MGM, Sony snapped up Columbia, Comcast has Universal. They all run their own streaming services. So they can make money off movies without people lining up at the box office. For Hollywood, that's a big plot twist. Traditionally, studios and theaters haven't always had the best relationship. Studios have looked at theaters as profit-snatching middlemen. They needed each other, so they made it work. Streaming has shifted the balance of power. The big companies that own the studios don't have to cater to what's good for theaters or moviegoers.
6 of the 8 major streaming services saw TV account for a greater share of audience demand than movies on their streaming services.
Movies aren't the priority they once were. This gives studios new leverage, and they're using it to squeeze theaters. They're taking a bigger share of the box office. They've shrunk theatrical windows. Some movies hit streaming right away. And this gives us even less reason to go to the movies.
Theatrical moviegoing is very much built around momentum. If you go to the movies and you have a spectacular time, you're going to want to repeat that feeling and that experience. But if there's not a attention-grabbing movie that's released for 3 more months until after that one experience, well, you're going to be less incentivized to go out to the movies. But when you have bigger kind of wide release films with full marketing budgets that are coming out with greater cadency, maybe 1 to 2 a month, it gets you into the habit of like, oh, I want to check that out. Oh, I want to check that out. Oh, I want to check that out. And suddenly you've tripled your movie going volume from a year or 2 or 3 years ago.
How to change people's movie-going habits? Brandon says it's not rocket science. Make stuff more people want to see. And that can't just be superhero movies. They're no longer a guaranteed payday. The latest Aquaman didn't crack $50 million at the box office. So Hollywood is in a wobbly, if familiar spot.
In the depths of the ocean, where
searching for its next cash cow.
That sort of transition has happened throughout the history of Hollywood. This is nothing new. Squeezing a genre, until it pops, finding the new fad and trend. I mean, westerns, musicals, action movies with Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. All of these had their peak and then declined, and then something else was found and helped substitute and transition to a new era of money making. It's really about finding whatever that next trend and fad is, while making sure that the superhero films that continue to come out are offering something new. It can't just be a run-of-the-mill vanilla superhero movie and expect to earn big bucks.
For the corporate decision makers in charge of the movies, Brandon says 2025 will be a decisive year. We're getting another Mission Impossible and Captain America, a Jurassic World, the latest Avatar. The hope in the industry, Brandon says, is these tentpoles will stabilize box office revenues. They'll reach 85% of the record highs set just before the pandemic. If that happens, he says the movie industry, as we've come to know it, should keep on keeping on. So, will audiences come back? That's a cliffhanger.
The entire entertainment ecosystem, film and TV, is going through a painful contraction right now. And the hope is that we reach a new homeostasis in 2025. If that doesn't happen, you're going to continue to see layoffs, you're going to continue to see downsizing, and you are going to see the volume of new product, both for film and TV, continue to decline.
That wouldn't be a happy ending. But it's also not the whole picture. If we pan back further, take one of those sweeping Michael Mann wide shots. Brandon says,
theatrical moviegoing will never go extinct. The world has thrown literally everything it could at theatrical moviegoing in this country. A Great Depression, world wars, the advent of every single new distribution technology of entertainment, from TV to cable to DVD to VHS, streaming. Every single one was predicted to be the end of movies, and it's never happened. There will always be a place for communal experience of big theatrical spectacle. To wax poetic, movie theater going is not going anywhere. It's getting smaller, but it is never going to collapse and disappear completely.
so with apologies to Sunset Boulevard, going to the movies is still big. It's Hollywood that's getting smaller. On your Radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. You know what they say, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. Love that old chestnut. And Canadians love to talk about the weather, complain about it. Check our free weather apps. And those apps are getting better all the time. The money behind them is also getting bigger. So who's paying?
Zoe Walker knew her guy Jack was the one when he asked if she'd marry him in Middle-earth.
Like, done. Let's go.
It took years of planning, but a Lord of the Rings wedding did happen this fall on a ranch west of Calgary.
When the celebrant or officiant asked for the rings, I had her state bring forth the ring bearer. And then I had my childhood friend stand up and say, I will bring them, I will bring the rings.
Like any bride, Zoe wanted things to be perfect. She had the dinner menus printed in English and Elvish. But an outdoor ceremony in Alberta in November?
You know, I was checking like Calgary weather, Cochrane weather, even Canmore and Banff to be like, what are you doing? And then like they got snow and then I was like, never mind. Like,
she may not have liked it, but the forecast was pretty spot on that day. And for that, she can thank airlines and insurers and trucking companies because they're all investing big bucks in better weather forecasting.
If you're in certain industries that are weather affected, the value of accurate weather information is huge. Weather affects, in Canada, billions of dollars worth of our economy.
Scott Kaler is the chief scientist at WeatherLogics. The Winnipeg company does forecasting for private industry. With extreme weather becoming more common, getting the forecast right has never been more important. And companies like Scott's, they specialize in really specialized weather advice. So farmers know when to spray their crops, and hardware stores know when to stock up on road salt.
We use a gridded system. What that means is that we divide the country into what looks like a checkerboard, and at each square on the checkerboard, we give a different forecast.
Think of it as a weather forecast for an area the size of a football field. Globally, weather forecasting services are worth more than $4 billion. And the number of companies that serve private industry is growing. Scott Kaler says that's good for everyone.
They're also providing their data through apps. And so typically, you can download their app for free and access different types of data or more accurate data than was historically available.
There's more than 5,000 weather apps out there. And the one Canadians use most? The Weather Network.
Weather does mean wildfires. Weather means floods. Weather means things that it didn't mean, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. It just is radically different.
Nana Banerjee is the CEO of Pelmorex, the firm that owns the Weather Network. He says AI is making forecasting more accurate than ever. And where it's going next? Personalized weather. Pretty soon, you'll be able to download an app that pings you when it's time to water your tomatoes or go for a jog.
So I don't run, I walk. But if you're a runner, it tells you the optimal times for a run today. The temperature is right, air quality is right, the wind speed is right. So good time to run.
It's not here yet, but when it is, it probably won't be free. For The Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Right now feels a bit like the calm before the storm for Canada. Donald Trump takes office in January. He's talking about putting a blanket global tariff on all U.S. imports. Other countries are dusting off their protectionist playbooks. For Canada, we're a trading nation. If the world is moving in the other direction, where does that leave us? John Manley is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Deputy Prime Minister. He's now the chair of Jefferies Securities. Hello there.
Hello.
So let's jump right in. Trump is talking about a 10% global tariff, could be as much as 20% in short order. Do you have a sense of what's behind this thinking?
Well, he is a true believer in the notion that tariffs create advantages for an economy like the United States. He thinks other countries or suppliers from outside the United States faced with those tariffs will lower their prices in order to be competitive in the U.S. market, and that will enable U.S. producers to be more competitive. Obviously, the result of that is that prices for consumers will go up. Prices of inputs for finished goods will go up. And for countries like Canada that ships a lot to the United States, we are going to find our own competitiveness further challenged. So I think for Canada, we have to get our own playbook ready, which will include retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, particularly in jurisdictions that really hurt him. No, needless to say, that'll hurt us too. But if you like Kentucky bourbon, my advice is stock up on it now, because the odds are that's going to be one of the things that gets hit with Canadian tariffs if we have to get into some kind of a trade war. So, this isn't really good for anybody, but I'm hoping that we'll get to a more moderate middle ground than the one that's being scoped out in advance of any negotiations.
Okay, some solid specific advice there for fans of Maker's Mark. But beyond them, the Kuzma deal is up for renegotiation in 2026. There's already been some chatter about that, it feels like, in Washington from the Trump camp. What do you think Trump being in power is going to mean for that renegotiation?
Well, of course, he thought NAFTA was the worst deal ever negotiated, but that USMCA, as the Americans call it, is the best deal ever negotiated, but now he thinks it could be improved. That was one of his election promises. So I think they will have a few key objectives in mind in doing that. First of all, I don't think we are the major target of his desire for renegotiation. I think Mexico is a much greater target. And that's because they fear that Mexico is being used by China as a backdoor entry into the U.S. market. So I think we've got no choice but to side with the Americans on that, and to make sure that, we continue to avoid having those accusations leveled against us. So that's part one of his negotiation. When they look at Canada, there are a few other things. First and foremost on their list is our system of supply management, particularly as it applies to the dairy sector. They're also not happy with us about the tax that applies to the large U.S. tech companies. That it's referred to generally as the digital content tax, and they see it as being targeted at American companies. That's going to be high on their list. So there are some things that are going to be difficult for the Canadian government. Doesn't matter what party is in power to negotiate, but they're going to be high on the list in trying to get us a renewal of the CUSMA.
If you look at trade more broadly, do you see countries around the world changing the way they view trade, looking at it more as win-lose, becoming more cutthroat in their dealings with other countries?
Oh, we're seeing that around the world for sure. The golden era of the world is flat, as Thomas Friedman called it. That seems to be pretty much past, and we're entering a new era of industrial policy. We saw it under the Biden administration with the inaptly named Inflation Reduction Act, big subsidies to U.S. industries and businesses. I don't think it's a continuum. I think it's a pendulum. I think in due course it'll swing back. We're going to see a lot of these industrial subsidies went to the wrong industries and end up being taxpayer-funded waste, because governments are just not very good at picking winners. And they're very poor at getting rid of the losers. That was a lesson that we took into the 90s and early 2000s, and cut out a lot of those programs. But now the world is back at it, and unfortunately for Canada, we have to some degree play that game, or like it or not, our companies are going to go where they can get handouts from other people's taxpayers.
Well, if you do see this as a pendulum, and now the pendulum is swinging, if we look at the era of trade liberalization, globalization proper, starting in, say, the 80s or 90s, that's been, 20, 30 plus years where that was really the order of the day. Now, as you say, if this pendulum is swinging in this more protectionist direction, is it a structural shift that we could see have similar kind of legs, like be measured in decades, not years?
Oh, I think so. I think it'll take quite a few years for people to realize that this is A, unaffordable, and B, not working particularly well. But let's admit that while a lot of statistics really improved over the course of our trade liberalization years, GDP went up as trade flows went up and wealth was produced, it left a lot of people behind, and that's why you've had some of the political phenomena that we've seen. We didn't figure out very well how to distribute the benefits that open trading environment created. We didn't figure out how to ensure that people that were in industries that went out of existence found jobs in something else. It's not easy to take somebody off an assembly line and train them to be a computer coder. We didn't do a good job at making sure that some of the communities that were single industry towns found something else to do. So we didn't do a very good job at marshaling the wealth that we created out of a free trade environment. And I think that's on our decision makers in every country.
So if we didn't do a good job sharing that kind of wealth and even largesse from open and free and liberal trade, now we're going back to this more protectionist kind of world. Do you have any faith that the benefits that we accrue in this world will be shared any better?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that in order to distribute wealth, you have to create it. And I think that if we spend too much of our energy figuring out how to redistribute, we're going to forget about creating it. We're going to discourage the people, the entrepreneurs and others that are looking to create jobs, and they'll just go somewhere else. So I think we have to get that balance right.
Is there a way that we can turn this world, whether it's the U.S. becoming more trade protectionist or the world moving that way, is there any way we can turn this to our advantage? Do you see upsides? Is there a way we actually can thrive in this new world trading order?
Well, we've got to, first of all, recognize, I think, what our strengths are, and we've got to exploit those. What pays our bills in Canada is the natural resource sector first and foremost. It's our biggest export sector. Some of our manufacturing is quite secondary to that. So we're going to have to continue to produce not just oil and gas, by the way, but critical minerals are increasingly important, as well as other mined products. Our forests and forestry products are important, and our agricultural products are important. We've got to double down on the things that we are, inherently our advantage. The other opportunity that I think Donald Trump presents to us is in human resources. He's creating a very hostile environment for non-Americans. And some of the best and the brightest are going to be wanting to come to North America, and Canada now becomes a better alternative to them. We can build with that. At the end of the day, it's our natural resources and our human resources that will give us a comparative advantage in the world, and I think we need to really double down on those.
All right, we'll hope for glass half full here. John Manley, thank you so much for all that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
John Manley is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Deputy Prime Minister. That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Habersrud. Thanks for listening.